everybody, and welcome to the media show on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Pallavidio, your moderator, and today it looks like we're going to be discussing the war in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine, because no matter what we do, that tends to dominate the media. With that, we're going to bring in some of our media experts. Former writer for Jimmy Kimmel Live. Let's bring in Rick Rosner to the show. Hey, Rick, it looks like the Middle East is with us, and it shall not go away. Also from Utah, we're going to bring in Dr. Dan Worthington. Looks like we're going to be discussing the Middle East. And of course, in San Francisco, we'll bring in Jim Eade. And then finally from Canada, we'll bring in Sasha Starr. And it looks like no matter what happens, we try to talk about the defense budget, but we're going to be discussing the Middle East. So does the media, is that what's going to occupy the media? Yeah, Rick. Well,
a very complicated thing is happening in the media and in the minds of everybody who makes public comments, which is how to think about and how to discuss what's happening between Israel and Gaza without being a monster and without being canceled. Because you want to support Israel, but you don't want to support Israeli soldiers going in and killing kids. You want to deplore the monsters of Hamas without, casting all there's this 3,000-year history that I don't understand very well, that 99% of everybody doesn't understand very well, and everybody's having to think about it, talk about it without seeming like a jerk.
May I say something that there was one Muslim cleric living today in Jordan, and he made the following submission to his Muslim brothers. He said that if you study Quran, you will never, ever to see even one word Palestine or Palestina or Palestine or whoever in each language it sounds differently, but you will never ever find even one word in all Quran. What you will find is suggestions that the Almighty gave that land to Jews, his chosen people, and asked them to govern and develop that land. So when people are trying to go back into history and figure out who is who, what is what, and who has more rights or so on, listen to your own imam. I forgot his name, but I have it also, in Jordan, who said exactly that. Now, I must admit that Hamas made a brilliant operation. First of all, they paralyzed all West because nobody except few countries, the developed world, first of all, G7, very few countries offered any support to Israel. It happened while Israel lost 1,300 and plus innocent people, mostly civilians, children, elderly people. A few of them went through a Holocaust. They had their numbers on their arm. They were not spared. They were killed. They were abducted. So with that, you understand, first of all, they proved that Israel today is not the Israel 50 years ago, when there was a Yom Kippur War, when there were countries like Egypt, Syria, encouraged and helped a great deal by then Soviet Union. They almost became victorious. However, it didn't happen because the difference in military strength was still too great then. And if you remember a few years before Yom Kippur War, there was 6 days war, and Israel absolutely destroyed armies of 5 countries, not 2, but 5. So with that, they show that, look at, we already 9 days after the massacre of October 7th and what Israel has done so far. Yeah, they bombed some quarters of Hamas, killing few people, few leaders, few innocents, quite a few innocents too.
So as of yesterday, there were 1,400 Israeli dead and 2,600 Palestinian dead.
That's
Which is
what
the way the Hamas or whoever is running Gaza at the time comes in, commits atrocities, and then Israel comes in, tries to clean house and consistently kills more people, which mostly isn't Israel's fault, but the Palestinians goad Israel into coming in and killing a bunch more Palestinians, which creates more supporters, I suppose, of Hamas.
Well, to understand what's happening these days with Hamas and all this story, to understand it, you have to go back almost 200 years to our big friend Karl Marx. Karl Marx was intensify the belief in a world's left, which are the proletariats in his version of history, all the left, all these radicals. And you see now that they are proliferating in the Western world, in campuses of United States, in European countries. You cannot openly say even a word that you support Israel. Very few people can do it today. They will be killed, ostracized. For several days now in Toronto, Toronto police asked Jews, stay home, don't attend synagogues, because we cannot guarantee your safety. Thank you to Karl Marx. So now the left is taken over. It's like if you're familiar with the work of Time Machine by Jules Verne. Remember Morlocks? When they traveled in the future, there were Morlocks. They were living under the night down somewhere in tunnels and elsewhere. And in the nighttime, they were coming up and they were attacking all the so-called former white oppressors and killing and maiming as many as they could during the night. Then coming back. This is today's world. Wake up.
Well,
This
we also have the fact in today's world that most countries are becoming more and more nationalistic there because there's waves of immigration that are going on. And so we see many countries turning to the right. So what we have to do is stop blaming, because once we point a finger at somebody, there's three fingers pointing back at us. And we've got to start changing our own minds rather than trying to change other people's minds about this. Because the fact is that none of us understand the history of that area. None of us understand the primordial hatred that people have for it. There are Arabs that wake up and say, blame the rain on the Jews. So, we're never going to get past that kind of thing. But when we want to talk about what is the proper response of Israel to the outrage that was committed by Hamas, and we have to continue to separate Hamas from the Palestinians, because Hamas is not their elected government. Hamas is a terrorist organization. And what do? What did we do with Osama bin Laden? What did we do with a terrorist organization's leaders? We hunted them down and we killed them. And this is what we should do.
That's what we're going to do.
In recent history, there's been a problem with the U.S. having to help incompetent governments. In Afghanistan, we propped up an army of 300,000 that collapsed as soon as we left. In Vietnam, we were during the Vietnam War, we were propping up corrupt and incompetent South Vietnamese.
We never learned our lesson.
No.
And in Gaza, what I did a little reading yesterday, and apparently what happened was that the civilian government of Gaza was super corrupt and just stole from the people. And Hamas came in and said, we're not going to steal from you. We're going to, provide some stuff and just let us do some light terrorism. And,
Light terrorism.
I would like to tell you an interesting story. There is a country by the name Estonia. This is part of former Soviet Union. Before that, it was an independent country overrun by Germans and on and on. I'm not going to go into it. What I want to tell you is, though, it's a small country, probably 1.5 million citizens. After the Soviet Union fell apart, Estonia became independent, but there were a lot of Russians from the Soviet times who were living in Estonia, and some of them were born in Estonia, but they were Russians. So what Estonia did, very interesting thing. No ethnic cleansing or any drastic measures. They just said, okay, you have a choice. You can, those who were born before 1940, of course, there are not too many of those, you are citizen of Estonia, doesn't matter what, because you were born in a free Estonia. Okay, those people who came into Estonia during the Soviet occupation, here's what you do. Number one, you go back to Russia, will give everyone 20,000 euros. You take all your stuff, whatever you want to take, go back to Russia. Number two, you can become Estonian citizens by getting exam in Estonian language, learning constitution, the system of laws in Estonia, and once you all pass, you're becoming citizen of Estonia with all the rights as natural Estonians. And number three choice, you don't want to go through exams, you want to speak Russian, continue so. You will have all rights in Estonia, except that you will not be able to vote because you're not citizens, and you will not be able, even if you wanted, to serve in the army, okay? So the same choice was given to Palestinians after Six-Day War when Israel grabbed all the Samaria, Judea, the Gaza. In any war, if you remember the war 1870, when Germany took Alsace and Lotharingia from France, was there upheaval, the terrorists or anything? No, people who lived there, they remained and they lived there just as well. Nothing really changed in their life. So when Israel overran all that, and this is, look, in a war, there are winners. There are also losers. So Arab countries in 1948, in 1956, in 1967, they were trying to overrun Israel and take all Jews to the sea, to the ocean, doesn't matter where, get them all out. 3 times they failed. And finally, in 1967, Israel overran all these territories. So by any loss of war, Israel, as a victorious nation, had 100% rights to all these territories. I don't care what the Palestinian supporters are going to say and all that. I don't care, period, zero. So in this case, Israel also had offered the people, the Palestinians, or how you want to call them, who were on these territories, choices. You can stay where you are, or you can go to other Arab countries. There are 19 Arab countries, or 62 Muslim countries. Just go elsewhere, and somebody will accept you. Now, the interesting story, though, is that no Arab country will accept Palestinians. Nobody needs them. Nobody wants them. Nobody helps them. This is the story.
But the people of the world, the governments of the world, they don't want Palestinians any place beyond Gaza, but which means they will pay a lot of money to rebuild and make Gaza nice. But this show is supposed
Did they rebuild anything?
What?
May I ask you, with all these billions of dollars, did they rebuild anything? Either in Gaza?
No,
or
I mean, there's been a lot of half-assery with Gaza. You're going to need like a real occupation,
corruption,
and for years, and by a significant number of Israeli troops, like 30, 40,000, and see if we can make Gaza embrace modernity rather than terrorism.
It
But
will
anyway,
take
this show is
55
supposed to be
years.
about the media, and we should be talking about how the media picks good guys and bad guys. Israel gets attacked. They lose, as of yesterday, 1,400 people to brutal murder. So right now, Israel's the good guy. We know in 2 weeks after Israel hammers Gaza, they'll start being the bad guy. We've got good guys and bad guys with the Speaker of the House debacle, and like people on the left, like me, are like, why aren't you making more noise about how ridiculous the Republicans are? And people on the right are saying, well, it's everybody's fault. And the media has to pick sides.
Well, it's in that case, it's clearly the MAGA heads that are the people that are not MAGA hat wearers that are the problem.
Of course.
It's not either the right or the left. I mean, it's the extreme right that's the problem. And the extreme right, unfortunately, has taken over the party to an extent that it's crippled it. Now, the party's got to kick them out and get back to being the Republican Party it used to be. And they will.
The same with the Democrats.
No, that's not entirely true.
With the crazies on the
Dr.
left.
Dan, you don't know any more about this subject than I do, believe me, because there's no mega wing of the Democratic Party that is taking over.
There is.
They don't have the committees, Dan. They don't have the committee
OAC.
assignment. No, the MAGA
now.
people are taking control. They kicked Liz Cheney out. They should bring
That's
Liz
because
Cheney back
Liz
to make the
Cheney was
House
a whack
Speaker.
job. Liz Cheney was a whack job.
Well, are you kidding me? What's Lauren Bobbitt?
A whack job.
Yeah, okay, Marjorie Taylor Greene. My kids, come on.
All right. So
yeah, whack jobs.
They're all right.
Mitt Romney, a whack job.
Yeah, but she's not in any charge of any committees. So, anyways, without further interruption from Dr. Dan, I'm saying that there's a problem, and we have this clear problem. And once we get past it, which we will, the Republicans will lose enough elections, and then they'll start electing normal people again, which they are a good party. They should. They'll get back to it, and then we'll have a more normal Congress, and then we can take action. But right now we can't be aligned because what Rick is saying is absolutely true. The media picks winners and losers, and right now we're all behind Israel because the poor Israel was attacked. And yes, that's an absolutely true statement. That is true. But then when they attack the Palestinians, then we're going to see bloody, and we're already seeing it, bloody Palestinian children in the hospitals, and the poor doctors saying, "Please stop bombing," and our hearts are going to, bleed for them. And so this is the problem that we've been having.
Jim, along those same lines, there was a recent case, I think I mentioned it in the news recently, where there was a landlord, I believe it was in Chicago, that lashed out, and it was the notion of hate crimes and everything, because definitely as a person, I think they might have been of the Jewish faith, that they lashed out and killed the young man who was of Palestinian background, and the mother was wounded and everything, and that has now been listed as a hate crime. And I'm sure that we'll see more of this going on in the world. We saw this with the Chinese, we saw this with COVID, we saw this with a number of other attacks, and I don't think that there is anybody on this panel or ever that has forgiven what Hamas did and all along those lines. But we do know that hate crime sometimes can be a reaction to what is going on.
Well, that's the problem. Before I got interrupted, that's what I was going to say, Mark, is that what we have is these hate crimes, and then there's this reaction in the contrary to people keep jumping to the person last attacked. And this is what we have to have is a solution, a clear and identified solution to this problem, which we don't have. The two-state problem solution, seemed within our grasp not that long ago. And if countries had really helped support building a Palestinian country and building it into the next Singapore or something like that, if that had happened, if the world had collectively tried to do do yeah, things would have been different. But the world didn't. They turned their back as soon as they were on the second page of the news.
I didn't expect you to be so naive.
I'm not.
Yeah,
naive.
really.
Well,
You are naive.
No. And stop name calling. Let's stop with the name calling
Jim,
right now.
Hold on a
Jim,
second. Hold on a second.
hold on.
Speaking of the name calling, because I'm
I
actually
would
going to put
like
it
to
back,
say
is
one
like Jim
thing.
said earlier, it is a media show,
I
and
would
there was
like to
a
say
Well,
one
Dr. Dan
thing.
is a famous
The
name caller.
people,
You
the
picked on Jacoby last show.
I'm
Jim,
not talking. Well, Jacoby.
Jim, I know.
Don't call me naive, Sasha.
I-
Then you can
Sorry,
talk.
you're no longer naive. I'm taking back. You're not naive at all. 100%.
Then express your
You're not
opinion.
naive. You know just as well as I do that the Palestinians are being brainwashed into something that they have to kill Israelis. That's only their thing, what they're doing for the last 70 years. There is
It's
no
Arab
industry,
terror,
there
yes,
is
in
no
general, right?
education, there is no business, there is absolutely nothing. They're taking billions of dollars from the Western donors, from Arabian donors, from whatever donors, from Iran people.
Sasha, I said that. They're
No,
corrupt.
okay,
They
so
were
you know
corrupt.
all that. So then how? Show me the way. When you're talking about building second Singapore or even second Malaysia or even second
Sasha, hold on.
Pakistan, just anything
Oh, Sasha, hold
viable.
on 1 second.
Show
Hold
me
on.
the way how
No,
it
hold on
did
1
is.
not
second. I
say
got a
that.
question
Year
for you.
one,
did
year
not say
three,
that,
year 10.
Sasha.
Show me.
Tell
Sasha,
me.
hold on
Not
a second. I got a
interested in
question
it.
for
Now, wait a
both
minute.
of
I'm
you and
going to
everything,
respond to
because
Sasha.
actually,
I
I
got
think
the right
y'all are
to
the only
respond,
ones
Mark. Come on.
representing this population and everything. There are several people here that represent the population. I'm going to mention it and everything. There is a number of concerns about how much influence and how much of the influence they are using that the kind of the elite Jewish population, I'll just call it elite, and everything uses, whether it is in Hollywood or whether it is in music or whether it is in a number of other places as well. So, Rick, I think you're of Jewish background. I know that because he told me that Sasha is. So, is there any legitimate concerns? Because I mean, that's one of the things that I've heard from
Well,
a
Mark,
variety
I
of
resent
folks.
you changing the subject
Mark,
here.
Mark,
I'm going to
let's
respond to what
take
Sasha said. And
Let-
what Sasha said is incorrect. What I was saying was that there was a two-state solution that appeared to be at our fingertips. It seemed to be possible. We had the Camp David Accords. We had this possibility where the leaders were coming together. Now it's blown up in our faces. And my question is, what do we do now? Because the hatred that Sasha is talking about isn't going away. It's not going anywhere. And I'm fully aware of it.
So
I
what's the way
understand
out?
it.
So hold
Go
on.
ahead,
So
Sasha.
the most of the blame probably goes to Hamas, but there are extremists on both sides who love to sabotage the peace accords.
Absolutely.
Primarily Hamas, but you also have right-wing
Zionists.
Israeli people, not a very big segment of the population, who are probably happy to have the strife go on. But you can't blame Israel for it, but you got to make Hamas illegal. The way Nazism was illegal.
I think
Embarrassed
everybody
by
agrees that
Germany
Hamas needs
after
to be
World War II.
illegal, but part of that conversation, because that, as I understood it, was part of the issue, even with Netanyahu, was that he was part of that conservative view that was in power and everything. Because there have been definitely swings. There have been swings in Israel to the more moderate side, and now there is a swing to the more conservative side. That even included some of the conversations around newer settlements and other things that were taking place more on the West Bank than on Gaza and everything. But that is part of the reason that they said that some of this hatred has been reignited.
I've read that Netanyahu added people to his cabinet who are the right-wing flamethrower, bomb thrower, not literal bombs.
Bibi
but the
didn't
ones
do
who
Israel
like to
any favor.
scuttle the agreement. And now we can hope that after all this, like Netanyahu, this is a big failure of his government. And they've already had to reconstitute a coalition government, I guess, to fight this war. And we can hope that that less extreme voices will prevail.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some people even on that in that conservative movement, and I mean, Dan may agree with some of their views, but they had some very staunch views around the rights of the LGBTQIA community there in Israel, as well as the rights of some other communities, including women in the military. And that is one of they are considered one of the most liberal militaries, but they have had some changes in the government in terms of women leadership in the military as well. So there have been some definite conversations around this nature of the conservative side of Israeli politics.
No, everybody's obliged to serve in the military in Israel.
Everybody what?
Everyone is required to serve.
No, everybody is required to serve, but there
in
was some
Israel.
conversations around women leadership by some of the far right members of the Israeli current government. There have been some pushes back on some of the LGBTQIA rights, as well as pushback on women leadership. And I'm not saying that it's not Netanyahu, it's some of those lieutenants that have definitely come out in some very staunch views against that.
Well, some of those are religious concerns, I understand.
Well, I mean, for the past 20, 30 years, the ultra right-wing settlers going into the West Bank, they've been kind of a belligerent, taunting presence to some
Absolutely.
extent.
Poking the bear.
Yeah,
I
and
disagree
so they
with that.
provoke a response from Palestinians, which is always murderous and over the top and terroristic. And then they go in and bring the hammer down. And plus Netanyahu's had his own problems with,
He's not been good for Israel lately.
and
needs to be
he
replaced.
likes distractions. Of course, he doesn't like this current distraction because
And
it's
his own
it's
corruption
horrific,
has
but-
been a big story too.
Gentlemen, I would recommend to leave question of Netanyahu for people of Israel. Don't try to solve Netanyahu problem for them. They will solve it themselves. As soon as this war will be over, the first thing they will fix this problem. I honestly believe that. Number two, about the settlements in Samaria and Judea. Israel won the war of 1967. Furthermore, he won another war in 1973, the War of Yom Kippur. Israel have 100% rights to all these territories. It's maybe failure on Israel that they did not have a control of these territories as it should have been. Maybe this is their mistake, but the fact is that their territories, because they are the winners of the last two wars. And
Following wars, Sasha, let me give you a little history lesson here. There's
How many?
treaties.
Oh,
There's
God.
treaties like, for example, Alsace-Lorraine. Is it French? Is it German? Well, it depends on what
Depends.
point in time that you say.
depends on the outcome of war. Of course.
And it depends on treaties following the war, because people sometimes divide up their winnings, and sometimes they cede back places.
Exactly. But it's
And
also
this is what has happened. And it's once again, I don't think this panel understands the Middle East well enough to having this kind of conversation. What we
Well,
should be
some of the
concentrating
people
on
do.
is the
Some of the
media's
people
response
do.
to it.
I think
James
some of the
makes-
people
hold
do
on.
understand.
I don't think
James
so.
makes
I
a
don't
good
think you understand,
point.
because
That-
when Babylonians came and took Jewish people back into Babylon, there was no state of Israel. So we want to go back to that. There was a state called Judah. It was goat farmers. Okay, so it depends on when you go back and point at the historical atlas.
I think
wanna
for all
talk about.
practical purposes,
So
we
let's
can
talk
go
about the media's
100
response to
years
it.
ago.
Well, wait a second. One thing, like you
They
made a
came
good
back.
point. You made a good point. After World War I, the peace treaty hammered Germany, and maybe Germany deserved to be hammered, but in practical terms, it was disastrous
The
because
Treaty of
it
Versailles.
led to the rise of Hitler and World War II only like
Absolutely.
26 years later. After
Right.
World War II, we were nice to the countries we vanquished. We occupied them. We made sure Nazism was squashed, but we threw a ton of money at them to help them rebuild. And Germany and Japan became responsible members of the world community.
Yes.
So,
Hold on a second. Did we really squash
now.
Nazism? Because definitely Germany has a strong
It was
Nazism
the best
history.
peace.
Wait. Two are talking.
The best peace in history, in recent history, comes when one side is decisively beat out the other side, and that created very good prospects for a long peace. Same thing what's happening in the Second World War. The Germany was decimated, same as Japan. And what happened? A peace which lasts now soon 100, less than
80
100.
years.
Soon to be 100 years, right? So today, so Israelis did not
Doesn't understand history.
do a good job of occupying and absorbing into Israel the Samaria, Judea, and Gaza Strip. They did not have a good job. what they did absolutely ridiculous thing, and absolutely General Sharon in 2005, he took 100% of Israeli personnel out of Gaza. And then he said, okay, Israel is out. We are no longer have to do anything with Gaza. Now you have opportunities to build a second Singapore. Okay?
So this is a problem with discussing the Mideast, that all that you've been talking about, this long history with all these chapters, is there's no time or tolerance for it on the news channels.
2005 is not that long ago. It's
Yeah, but
18
the complicated issues don't get discussed in complicated ways
I mean,
in the news.
yeah,
There's this
Rick,
whole,
I mean, part of the
nobody
problem is that
understands Israel except Israelis and Palestinians, and their views, of course, are skewed by who they are. But you have to, they're the ones who understand because it's their lives. But we get just very half-assed coverage because we have no patience for more in-depth coverage.
I mean, isn't that part of the problem? Because I think definitely Jim kind of alluded to it. The part of the problem is that it is a bigger issue, and a lot of times we are looking for the quick coverage and looking for the simple solutions, and there aren't always simple solutions to complex problems. I mean, I even think back that there is a concept, if you want to talk about nation building, that goes on in nation building, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Latin America, or whether it's in the Middle East. And that is a question of whether you are going to assimilate into the mainstream culture or whether you are going to go your separate way. I mean, we saw that during the civil rights struggle here in America and all along those lines. And to Dan's point as to our viewpoint and all along those lines, and us being outsiders and leave it to Israel. I mean, there are some folks that are paying close attention to the other in other parts of the world, to what is going on, to what Rick was just talking about, and Jim, to the whole house conversation. So are you saying that the folks in France and Germany don't have a right to their opinions about what we as the Western power are doing in our own political front? Because there are a number of folks I've heard on platforms, various platforms, folks that have opinions on both the right and the left as to what is going on with our current
I'm
House
still
Speaker.
waiting for Russia to take care of Putin. You know, I was going to wait for a long time, I think. But that's the way these things get settled.
Right. We definitely have the right to our opinion. Terrorism isn't something that's new. As a matter of fact, the British have been terrorists for years. I've been doing some research on my ancestors, or the Plantagenets. If you looked at what they did, and these are Brits, okay, because my super 23rd great-great-grandfather was Edward II, and they had these people and that they didn't like, all right? So here's what they did. They basically cut off their testicles, stuck them in their mouth, then cut off the person's head and stuck them on a pike, and then paraded around England.
Yeah.
Okay. And that
Isn't one of the biggest terrorist groups? We talk about Palestine.
Well,
Isn't one
that
of the biggest
works.
terrorist groups? And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't one of the biggest terrorist groups actually based in another country that begins with an I in their name as well? Because I know that there was a lot of attacks that I think still go on to this day in Ireland. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the IRA still an active terrorist organization?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So terrorism is nothing that's
Not really.
new. It's still exists. And
They're more of a social club now.
Yeah. So what's the point of it? The point of
Drinking mostly.
Yes.
the point of terrorism isn't to
Don't fight over
demolish
what to
the
drink.
they killed, because they that person's dead anyway. Well, but also what they do is they draw and quarter, which is basically cut off your
Awful.
intestines and then stick your intestines in the fire while you watch.
No, humans being cruel to other humans.
Humans
is
being
not
cruel
right.
to humans, okay? But the
It's been
whole
done
idea was to terrorize all the people that watched it. In other words, they're going, this could be you if you don't listen to us and do what we're supposed to do. The whole idea of terrorism is psychological.
What the English did to the French and the French did to the English, you know, it took them 300 years.
definitely that,
but you know, come on.
But the real
But
question
speaking
is,
of that, and coming back to the media discussion,
but
wasn't one of the
media
biggest turning
cover any
points Well, it was the biggest turning
Because
point
we're
in
the
terms of the
delivery
Vietnam protests when folks saw that, and I think that this is what's even going on
We're
with
the
Hamas
delivery
and everything. When folks saw that young boy literally murdered in front of their eyes, and it wasn't
Yeah.
a movie
Should,
scene and
should the
everything.
media cover that? Because remember, the media is now the delivery system of terrorism. And this is a real problem because YouTube
Yep.
used to show, I don't know if they still do, videos on this all the time. Twitter, they're wondering if they should show videos on it all the time. And so the media,
Well, that's the media part of the
The
conversation
media
I'll get
needs
into,
to
because there
take
is
some
a organization in Europe that has sent warnings to TikTok, which is a Chinese-based company, Facebook, and Instagram's parent Meta, YouTube, and X, which was formerly Twitter, because they are saying that there are several reports of misleading or illegal content about the war on their platform, and are reprimanding those social media companies and saying that they could face billions of dollars in fines if an investigation later determines that they violated EU content moderation laws. So is this something that they should be doing? Because I mean, a lot of folks.
I can tell you on YouTube, they had covered beheadings. In other words, you might be able to do it right now. Go on YouTube.
Well, I can't do it, but Rick can. He can create some artificially intelligent generated terrorism and post that.
You could.
We don't know what
No,
we're seeing.
I don't even know how to do Photoshop, so I'm
But the real question is the media, because if they're covering it the way the terrorists want them to be covering it, aren't they really
Complicit.
supporting a terrorist organization? There is no other reason to show somebody being beheaded except, well, number one, to get views, because people do view that stuff. And then number two, to get revenue, obviously. But three, the minute you do that, your media organization is a supporter of terrorism, whether you like it or not.
Complicit.
Yeah, Dr. Dan. In other words, no matter how you look at it, if we were to show a video of somebody being beheaded by whoever, an ISIS guy, it doesn't matter. Okay. We are really a supporter of terrorism, whether we like it or not. Because the whole idea, remember, the guy's dead. So that has nothing to do with that person. It's gone. The whole idea is to put in the minds of the viewers that this could happen to you if you don't do what we say.
Well,
And
speaking
media
of
is
that,
doing
speaking of that and getting off the war just for a second, apparently a major company, we talked about them earlier and everything, has come out in news, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts about this, but Google is in front of Congress, and they are asking Congress not to ban teens from social media. So Google has responded to the Congressional Child Online Safety proposals with its own counteroffice for the first time today, urging lawmakers to drop problematic protections like age verification text. So they're out there saying that we don't need that. So Google is rejecting state and federal attempts at requiring platforms to verify the age of users, like forcing users to upload copies of their government IDs to access an online service. And I don't know if anybody's been hacked, and I've been hacked on a couple of times and everything. That whole process of trying to get them to accept your ID, even if it's a legitimate ID, can be a whole nightmare in and of itself and everything. So I don't know if y'all have had that experience, but I have. It's not always pretty, because they'll come back and be like, no, it's not clear enough. It's not good enough. It's not this enough. And you're sitting there going like, how many times do I have to photocopy this thing before y'all actually believe that I am who I say I am? And all along those lines, because it's that whole algorithm and those people that are looking at it, they might not actually be people. They may be AI and everything, and they might be like, hey, that's not really you. But then we can't prove that that's you. So that is a issue. So apparently Google is saying, wait a minute, stop telling us not to let teens on our social media, because we do know that teens are a major part of their social media life. Like they're a major part of, I mean, Facebook was basically created by teens, as I understand it, and everything many years ago, and all along those lines. So what is our thoughts?
Compared to Facebook, Google's done an excellent job of preserving the public image as a benevolent company. But obviously, Google is not altruistic, and it's going to defend its interests. We think of it as the friendly place to go to look up stuff. And because we get free look up stuff from them, we're like, yeah, they're good guys, but they're
selling your profile information to other companies. And
yeah, they're selling it. And by the way, I know that Nick is not a big fan of YouTube, but I've now got the name of the YouTube CEO. But Neil Mohan, I think is how he pronounces it, said the platform doesn't serve personalized ads to kids and provide parents with a set of family control. So what he said is, Families everywhere deserve the same safe, high-quality experience online, no matter where they live, and all children and teenagers ought to have the same access to the
it's
opportunities
all
the internet
noise.
provides. As
It's
young people
all
continuously evolve the way they shop, show up online, so will
You
our
know,
services
Bart,
and
it's
policies.
all noise. Horny kids are gonna get at what they want to get at, regardless of whatever supposed controls. But I want to talk about Twitter, which used to be kind of used to have truth. Well, they used to have a staff that was responsible for making sure that BS wasn't flooding Twitter. Now that it's X, Elon Musk fired at least 3/4 of the people who were trying to keep the BS off of it.
Pretty much the
And
first thing
now
he did.
with Israel, Gaza, the BS is just flooding. The imagery. You were talking about terrorist images. Like it's not just actual images coming out of the region. It's images from every place else that are misattributed for propagandistic purposes and just to get clicks.
Yeah, right. Is it terrorist style? In other words, is it blood and guts that they're showing? Rick, I don't follow Twitter, so
I mean, Twitter used to have some truth controls, some at least
Right.
minimal, responsibility for knocking out BS. And most of that staff was fired when Elon Musk came in and cleaned house. And this is
Well, because he learned they worked for the CIA. That's what the problem was.
Yeah, but the deal is that there's the BS explosion on Twitter has never been bigger than during Israel Gaza.
Right. So it's garbage then. That's what you're saying.
Well, like there was a picture of a crucified Israeli kid nailed to the wall.
And there's no way of knowing.
And not
except
real
by
at
taking your
all.
own
It was
experience.
like something from years ago and
I
was,
see.
and was not, the kid wasn't really crucified.
And
It was-
why would Twitter show that other than they're a supporter of a terrorist organization?
No, because somebody put it up because they wanted to make a point, or they wanted to get 10,000 views, and Twitter
They're a supporter of terrorism. I mean, see, this is where the media is taking no responsibility as being a enabler for a terrorist. And the thing is,
Musk is calling it freedom.
no. It isn't freedom, because there is no reason to show that other than to create fear in the minds of the people that are watching it. No other reason. Okay. Or get money. Okay. So there's only two reasons, I guess: make money or create fear.
Yeah, but it doesn't create fear in my mind. It just pisses me off. Right.
Well, whatever it does, it creates emotion to the person who's watching it.
Right.
And what you're seeing is really an enabler.
right?
You're no worse than the terrorists. In other words, the media is no worse than the terrorists who did it. Except today, I believe, Rick, they can probably do it without killing people, because you can have artificial intelligent bots and create images and do that.
You can repost something, which apparently got
You
an
can repost
Algerian
it,
soccer
and
player
then
in
you-
trouble because he's being investigated for anti-Semitic remarks because he found a post and apparently he reshared the post, and the post may have had some anti-Semitic remarks from a certain Palestinian minister, and now the French are investigating him as an anti-Semitic, and he's apologized. And a number of them.
Quickly,
We gotta hold our horses here.
Google just added AI to image search, where if you're looking for a picture of like a terrorism victim, you can add AI, and Google will not just give you real pictures of terrorism victims; it'll generate some of its own for you.
Yeah, we got to get back to what's real here, though. One is the question of freedom versus censorship, and it's a complicated issue. We can't make it too simple. And the other is that if I repost an ugly photo, I'm not as bad as a terrorist pulling the trigger. I may be complicit. I may need to be educated.
You're an enabler.
Why I should not do that. But it's a false equivalency to compare them to and to equate them.
You're pretty close, though. I mean, you're an enabler. If you look at it this way, let's imagine.
I disagree, Nick. And man, if you were, I don't know how to put it without being.
Imagine somebody did a terrorist act, and it was just them and the other person, and no one else ever saw that terrorist act. The terrorist act dies when that person dies. It doesn't get spread.
It always gets spread.
The only way they can spread their evil wings is to put that on a media and get it out there where other people will suck up into their evilness. And so the thing is,
But I mean, isn't that part of the problem? And I'd love to hear everybody's
is
thoughts about that.
an
Isn't that part of the problem even with our news coverage? Because if you look at most local news coverages, most of what they cover is the crime of the day, the crime of the
it's wrong,
day, and
Mark.
all along those lines. I think that Kim has used this
Before we
expression.
had
I agree with
Twitch
it, if it
and
bleeds,
Twitter
it leads,
and all this
and all
stuff,
along those
people
lines. So
did word
that
of
is
mouth.
not to say that those aren't problems, because definitely gangs and drugs can be a problem. But if we are constantly putting that as the forefront, is that and not adding to the problem
There
as well.
used to be a saying in local TV news: if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah,
It
right.
leads, it leads.
That's
Right.
a long-term saying. That goes back
Yeah,
to the
and the thing is, the media takes no responsibility. They wash their hands with the blood of creating more and more terrorists, and so the media is basically an enabler of terrorist organizations.
Well, okay, let me
The
tell
only
you,
problem is,
hey,
won't
hey,
admit
Dick, just really quickly.
Mark, You're
Dick, just really
you're a
quickly, I'm
journalist.
going to give you an example of how that can
Yeah.
be turned in the opposite
That'd
direction.
be-
Because a long time ago, I used to work for a African American newspaper called the Carolinian, and they had that same philosophy that the publisher, and he since passed on, always wanted to get the crime story and the crime story along those lines, and then he would put in the headline in the big red ink to catch people's attention, because it would be on the fold,
Sure.
so you would see what that story was and everything. So what my editor at that time did was he was against that philosophy, so he would get some issues that were more interesting and use that same philosophy of the red line, but be having a conversation, say, about homelessness or a conversation about whatever. But it was
Right.
his way of pushing back by not just doing the crime of the day, which is what our publisher wanted us to do, but instead using that tactic, because it was the red line that was catching people's attention, to bring some other issues there and all along those lines. So it was kind of his counter protest, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, good for him that they start actually fighting this enabler organization, otherwise known as media.
Right.
So-
Enables a lot of terrorism to exist. Go on, Rick.
I want to talk about like a complete failure, well, almost complete, of the media to cover. So we're looking at the House of Representatives, which doesn't have a speaker. But I've been yelling on Twitter about this current in 9 months, more than 9 months since this Congress began, they've enacted 15 pieces of legislation. A normal House of Representatives enacts 200 to 600 pieces of legislation in 2 years. This House is on track to do 80% less work than the previous worst Congress in history. And I don't know, there's no coverage of this. And the coverage of the whole speaker thing tends to lazily just not assign any blame, but just said, well, here, it's lazy, incomplete reporting that, that relies on false objectivity to avoid discussion of the causes and implications.
Oh, we all know it's the Democrats' fault. They need to form an alliance with the Republicans and get a speaker. Instead, because they're such party hacks, just like the Republicans are, and they have no independent thought, which bothers me with both parties, you get what you get. In other words, this is what you voted for. You voted for not people that think independently. You voted for party hacks. So you have two groups of party hacks. They can't think for themselves, so they have to join a party, and you get dysfunction. What can I
we
do?
don't get this discussion. What you're saying, the words you're saying,
Yeah.
you get party hacks because of all the money needed to run
exactly.
and
Yeah, well,
gerrymandering. So,
you're
like
right.
the people,
It's
if
money that creates the party hacks. So,
right,
so
the people, the politicians who can
Well,
hold
people
their
have nothing to do.
noses and do what the job takes now, which is spending half your time going to the phone call building and cold
Right.
calling people and saying,
Right. It's all about money.
donate. The
Yeah.
people who can tolerate that are often incompetent and unethical jerks. And so, there are lots of good people in Congress,
Sure.
but there are enough unethical idiots that they've paralyzed the system.
Well,
Rick, I would like to mention something, and it was addressed to Nick, but I don't see him here. Okay, so here's the Democratic Party. They're all organized,
Never
united. They have their own leader, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
So what they're saying, okay, here we are. We like our leader, Jeffrey. We're going to vote for him. You do whatever you want. You have your better speakers than Jeffrey. Vote for him. You have majority. Vote. Do something, idiots. They don't. They don't. They can't. They're not well organized. They're all selfish, trying to keep their jobs. They have nothing, not a single a word of wisdom to say in their defense. There is no defense.
Yeah,
But Sasha, along those same lines,
the
are
thing
they
is,
deadlocked?
what
And different way from Dan as well, because they're
yourself.
deadlocked. Because even if every Republican voted, I still don't think they would have the 217 that they need. And the same with Hakeem Jeffries, a gentleman that I had the pleasure of meeting. And I actually liked his personality and all along those lines, but that's neither here nor there. But definitely, what is your thoughts about that? Because I think we're at a deadlock, and it could be a deadlock that could last for
no, if the
months.
Republicans united, they could pass
Because
it.
Congress is controlled by party hacks.
I'm feeling so sorry for the
Democratic Party
poor Republicans. Oh, the Democrats
None of them
won't
are
bail
talking
them
for
out.
themselves.
Yeah.
They're never
The Democrats won't bail out the Republicans. Come on, you expect them to?
No, what they need to do, Jim, is they need to leave the party. See, that the whole point is that you have, over the last 200 years or whatever, created a mindset that you have to join a group think or a party.
It's not
Where-
over 200 years.
if you happen to go to law school,
Gingrich
you're
in the
trained to-
1990s, Nick.
Well,
Very
speaking of a group thing, and I
Very
know we're
recent.
winding
Nick-
down because I was actually going to bring up
Nick
two
Gingrich
sports issues.
Grow
And all
Called
on
out
those
the
lines, 'cause
contract on
Get some
America.
chutzpah.
speaking of a group thing, and I was going to bring up two sports
It's been
issues really
Republicans,
quickly.
Nick, not Democrats.
You know,
That's
they
neither
need to
looking
leave
into
their
a whole.
party too. And they both need to leave their party and become independents.
Well, there has been a rise in independence in the
All
country.
the, all
There
the
is definitely
Republicans have
that.
to do is get rid of the MAGA heads like Lauren, Lauren, Michelle. What I'm blanking on people's
Marjorie
names.
Taylor
Lauren
Greene and
Boebert,
Lori Boebert.
Marjorie Taylor
Thank you,
Greene.
Lauren
Lauren
Boebert.
Boebert is doing a pretty good job
Get
of
rid of 'em.
eliminating herself by getting caught,
Yeah.
giving hand action at a
Don't
play.
blame the Democrats for the Republicans screwing up.
No, it is. It's their fault too, because you
No,
need
but
to
then
Each
It's
party
both parties,
has
and there's got to be some changes
No,
in the
they're-
party
they're
system. I
part
do
of
agree
the-
that there's a
Congress.
Just
There's a
no
lot of
party
blind
has
voting that goes
bad-
on.
Oh
It's
no,
simple.
it's not my fault. Even though I'm a congressman, if you're a
Each-
congressman,
Okay, so
it is your
and
fault.
they're passing and they're voting for the person they want as the
No,
House
they're-
Speaker.
They're
doing
voting.
their jobs,
They're,
Nick.
they're voting
The
their party
Republicans
line,
aren't.
their party hacks.
Why
Okay?
don't the Republicans vote for Jeffries?
You know, they should. Okay,
They
I mean, the
should.
thing is, what
So
they
each
should
party
do is
has-
become independent. And in other words, why is it there's no independent thinking in the United States? All you're showing me in Congress is that Americans can't think independently. They have to be part
Hey,
of
Nick,
it.
is that just the Congress? Though I have said before,
Not
and I've
since
said
the
it again. How many
1990s,
people do you know that go to vote and they vote according to what those little placards that they are given is,
Yeah.
and it's a endorsement group that is endorsing
That's what I
those
say to
candidates,
this.
and they aren't. And you ask them why they're voting, they'll tell you because that's who their leadership, whatever that leadership is,
Oh,
told them to vote
that's
for.
right. That's just what I want. I just
No,
want
that,
party heads
see,
that can't
you don't
think.
have to go very far back in time to
Worse
know
than
you're
I
wrong, Nick.
They're
Joe
party
Biden
heads
used to
that
get
can't
criticized for going across the aisle. Joe
Right.
Biden was a senator and he worked across the aisle. Tip O'Neill was a representative.
think. They
and he
shouldn't have to work across the aisle. There
You
should
don't
be
have to
no
go very
aisle.
far back when that was normal.
Jim,
It's not
there should
normal
be
now.
no aisle
And you
to
trace
work
it back to
across.
Newt Gingrich and what he did to the Republican Party, and he made it all vote one way. And if you were voted against them, you got primaried. So the lesson was clear. And the Republican Party has
Oh, I
been that
see.
way ever since. So
Well, like I said,
Jerry-
both parties
okay,
have
so
some
Jim-
faults.
You get primary.
gerrymandering.
it's Newt Gingrich started it.
Gerrymandering.
You had people
and
working across the aisle before then.
There should be no aisle to work across, my friend.
gerrymandering.
Oh, come on.
and-
Don't be silly.
Hold on.
That's silly.
Gerrymandering and news channels that cater to a particular slant have emptied out the middle, at least in elected politicians.
There's a
You
lot of
can
truth
look
to
at the charts that shows the number of politicians who are able to cross the aisle. You've got a bell curve Republicans, bell curve for Democrats. Those bell curves used to overlap, but they've been pulled apart over the past 30, 40 years.
I can't tell you how many dinner parties I've been to with people that were centrist Republicans with centrist Democrats, and we agreed on almost everything, and our differences were fairly slight.
The people
but nowadays, everybody is extremes. They got extremes. I'm still centrist, but I don't know who to talk to.
That's
the people I love most are.
Hold on a second. Isn't that extreme notion part of the problem in general? I would argue that, and people can disagree with me, I would argue that that is part of even what has gone on in other parts of the world, be it Eritrea and Ethiopia, be it even Israel and Palestine, because I actually think that we are letting the extremists are dictating the conversation, and those that want to have a more middle of the ground kind of conversation that would be more reasonable are not are being definitely deafened by the roar of those that are the extreme side, and I think that's going on worldwide.
Russia has spent $300 million, not a lot, but that money is well spent over the past 10 years to increase polarization in countries. They've got a building in St. Petersburg full of people writing and and broadcasting on social media divisive propaganda.
It's a 6-story building right in the center of St. Petersburg, and the first spectacularly successful operation on them was election of Trump as president of the United States. That was by far the most successful operation in all media of all the times. Now, speaking about the crossing the aisle, look, as for a Canadian, it's a little bit a foreign subject to me, I must admit. But I think the person who had to cross the aisle in the last 2 weeks, it was the Speaker McCarthy. He dreamed of that job. It was a whole aim of his life to become a speaker. So now there was a threat to be dethroned, and with a small support from Democrats, by offering them anything what they want, by kissing their asses publicly, do anything what you want, and you would remain a speaker.
You're right, Sasha. At the beginning, what he did was give into the demands of the crazy Republicans,
yes,
extreme right MAGA hat wearers, and then what he could have done was make a deal with a small amount of the Democrats. And
just
he would still be the Speaker of the House if he had done that.
100%.
No doubt about that. I know we're getting ready to wind down this conversation and everything. But I was going to just mention two sports things, like I said, that I was going to mention earlier on the media show, because apparently the MLB's first female, that's Major League Baseball's first female GM, has left the job. And that was actually something that I know is in an area that Nick is a fan of, that being Florida, because she was a member of the Marlins. And I'm sure there's going to be some conversation as to whether another woman needs to come in, because like I said, that was the first female GM that had ever had the job. Yeah. That'll be part of the conversation as well. So it'll be interesting to see what folks' thoughts are about that, and we'll get to that maybe on World Edition or some of our other shows. And last but not least, there are several sports that are being added to the LA Olympics. So I know you're going to be going, Jim. I know you're going to be heading there in 2028 and all along those lines, attending the games. But there's going to be baseball and softball. They've been added. Lacrosse has been added. Squash has been added. Steve will be glad to know cricket has been added. This is the one that caught me off guard, because I know my nephews play it. But apparently, if you don't want regular football, flag football has been added. We can see flag football going on into the Summer Olympics as well. So they have added the sport of flag football into the Summer Olympics.
Fantastic, but not chess was added.
Not chess, because they're anti-intellectuals. And with that, we're out of time. We'll see you next week on the media channel on the Pod TV network.
Blame Newt.